When I was 9 years old, my family moved into a small rental house on the edge of a quiet Midwestern town. It was old, creaky, and smelled faintly of wet soil and paint thinner. My room was at the back, overlooking a narrow alley where cats often fought at night. My mother always told me to keep the basement door locked, though she never explained why. It was a rule she repeated more than once, always with a nervous glance toward the floorboards beneath us. I didn't question her at first, until I started hearing things from the basement after dark. It began with scratching. Soft at first, like a mouse trapped behind the walls. Then, slow tapping, deliberate, patient, as if someone was testing the wood from the other side. One night, I woke up and realized it wasn't coming from the walls at all. It was coming from the small basement window, the one just above ground level, near the laundry line outside. I crept downstairs and peeked through the crack in the door. Something pale moved past the window. It wasn't a person exactly, it was shorter, smaller, its movements uneven, as if crawling on all fours. The next morning, I told my mother what I'd seen. Her face went blank. She grabbed my shoulders and made me promise to never go near that window again. She called our landlord, a man who'd owned the property for decades, and I overheard them arguing in low voices. He said, "That thing's been there longer than any of us. It won't cross the door if you don't invite it." My mother went quiet for hours after that. That night, she nailed the basement door shut. Weeks passed. The noises stopped. But one morning, my mother found muddy handprints, small ones, pressed against my bedroom window from the outside. There were footprints, too, leading toward the backyard fence. My mother screamed for me to get in the car, and we left everything behind. Years later, I learned from the landlord's daughter that the house had once belonged to a family whose youngest son had vanished, his body never found. He used to play near that same basement window. Sometimes I still dream about it, the faint tapping on glass, the sound that grows louder until it feels like it's coming from right behind me. I wake up sweating, my heart pounding, and for a moment, I can almost hear someone whispering through the dark, "Let me in." When I was 8, my parents bought an old farmhouse in rural Virginia. The upstairs hallway had peeling wallpaper covered in faded floral patterns. My mother wanted to replace it, but my father said we should save money and just paint over it later. I used to run my fingers along the wallpaper while walking down the hall, tracing the shapes of flowers and vines. One day, I noticed something strange. In a corner near my room, the flowers seemed to form a shape. A girl's face. Faint, but clear as day, small eyes, a sad smile, and pale cheeks that seemed too real to be a coincidence. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But the next morning, her expression looked different. Her mouth was open, just a little. The next night, it seemed wider. I called for my mom, but when she came, she saw nothing, just peeling wallpaper. Still, I avoided that corner. Weeks later, while my parents were at work, I heard someone crying softly in the hallway. When I turned the corner, there she was, the same girl, standing by the wall, her skin blending perfectly with the wallpaper, as though she were part of it. I screamed and ran outside. My parents thought I had a nightmare, until my father decided to start peeling the wallpaper to show me it was nothing. Beneath the paper, we found writing etched into the plaster, names, dates, and drawings of children's faces. Dozens of them. All scratched into the wall. At the center was one name repeated over and over, Lila. We learned that the house had once been a children's home in the 1940s, before a fire forced it to close. Several children died, trapped upstairs. One of them, a girl named Lila, was never found. After we moved away, my father told me he'd gone back one last time to lock up. The wallpaper corner had changed again. This time, there were 2 faces. Mine was next to hers. Sometimes I dream of her. Standing by the wall, whispering my name, asking me to come back. Her face still smiling, only now, it looks exactly like mine. There was a park 2 streets from my childhood home that everyone called the silent playground. The swings creaked, but never squeaked. The slide was always cold, even in summer. Parents warned us to stay away after dark because something wandered there at night. Of course, kids never listen. One evening, my friend Brian dared me to meet him there after sunset. I remember the air being unnaturally still, the streetlights flickering behind us as we pushed open the rusted gate. The playground looked abandoned. Not destroyed, just waiting. The swing chain swayed slightly, though there was no wind. Brian laughed it off and jumped onto one of the swings, pumping his legs. I stayed by the edge, my stomach tight. I remember hearing laughter then, high-pitched, distant, like a group of kids playing somewhere in the dark. But there was no one around. When Brian looked up, his face turned pale. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. That we both froze. The swings around us began to move, slowly, evenly, as if invisible children were sitting on them. One by one, they creaked higher. Then, faint voices started to chant something. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt them, like a vibration in my chest. Brian screamed and ran toward the gate. I turned to follow, but I saw something near the slide, a shadow, shaped like a small boy, staring right at me. Its head tilted, and the swing stopped all at once. The next day, Brian didn't come to school. His mother said he'd been found in bed, pale and unresponsive, muttering, "They wouldn't let me leave." He never recovered fully, moved away after months of silence. I tried to tell my parents what happened, but they didn't believe me. I went back years later. The playground was gone, replaced by a parking lot. But late at night, if you stand there long enough, you can still hear the swings moving, and a child's voice asking, "Want to play?" My cousin Emily lived in a Victorian house that had belonged to her grandmother. It was the kind of place that felt alive, floorboards that sighed, wallpaper that peeled like old skin, a clock that chimed at odd hours. There was one door upstairs that was always locked. Her parents said it led to the attic, but even as kids, we could tell they were lying. Emily and I would press our ears against the wood sometimes, listening. Sometimes we heard breathing. Not wind, breathing. One summer night, we decided to find the key. We searched drawers, shelves, even under carpets. Finally, Emily found a small, rusted key hidden in a jar of buttons. My heart was racing as she slipped it into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led upward into blackness. The smell hit first: mold, dust, something sweet and rotten. At the top was a small room filled with children's furniture, a crib, a rocking horse, and tiny shoes scattered across the floor. On the far wall was a mirror, tall, cracked, covered in dust. As we stepped closer, I realized something was wrong. The reflection wasn't ours. The two figures standing in the glass were children, but not us. They had hollow eyes, mouths slightly open as if whispering. Then, Emily's reflection smiled, a cold, wrong smile that didn't move on her real face. The light flickered, and the door slammed shut behind us. When her parents found us hours later, we were sitting at the bottom of the stairs, crying. The door was locked again, the key gone. Emily changed after that. She stopped talking, started waking up at night staring into mirrors. One morning, her mother found her standing in front of that same door, humming an unfamiliar lullaby. They moved out soon after, and the house was demolished a few years later. But every so often, I dream of that reflection, still smiling, still waiting to be let out. Years after those strange events, I thought I'd left it all behind. I was grown, with a new home, new life, new everything. But horror, I've learned, doesn't always stay in the past. It follows. It waits. Sometimes, it changes shape. One night, as I unpacked boxes in my new apartment, I found something that shouldn't have been there, a photo from the old Virginia farmhouse. In it, a faint shape stood behind me on the stairs, a small girl. I never took that photo. I never owned that camera. From that day forward, small things began to happen. My lights flickered. The wallpaper in my hallway started to peel in one spot, revealing faint floral patterns beneath. I began hearing tapping at night. The sound came from the baseboards, then the window. One night, I woke up and saw muddy footprints leading from my front door to my bed. Child-sized. My breath caught as I realized, they weren't just memories. They were returning. That week, I burned the photo. I moved again. Yet sometimes, wherever I go, the signs reappear, scratches on the wall, whispers in the vents, the faint sound of swings creaking in the wind. I don't know if it's the same presence or a collection of every shadow from my childhood, bound to me by fear. But I've stopped running. Because one night, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They're not haunting the houses, they're haunting me, and when I close my eyes at night, I still hear the voice of that first thing in the basement whispering softly, "Let me in."